Session of the day, and this is panel C, which is Humour and the Politics of National Identity. And so we're going to stay with the format, which is that we will have the papers will be in exactly the order they appear on the program. We have, and also we're going to stay with 20 minutes and go through all three papers, and then we'll have plenty of time for question and answers at the end. For all of you there's a mic and a camera over there, and the mic is multi-directional. So please don't make rude comments about us. Because then you get kicked out. So on that note, I'm delighted to introduce our first speaker, who is Imen Neffati. And she will be speaking, giving us a talk entitled Blasphemy and Satire, Has Charlie Hebdo Become Emblematic?
Can I send that? Or do I have to
You can...
it's totally up to you, however you
can
do
just
it.
stand?
Okay.
Okay.
And I'm going to time myself 20 minutes.
Okay. So I'll have you wait.
So I'm just going to introduce you to my thesis. I'm just second year PhD. I just started. So I'm doing through a textual and contextual analysis of Charlie Hebdo since its inception in 2006. In 1960, up until the Paris attacks in January 2015, my thesis will study how the pursuit of artistic freedom through visual blasphemy has become emblematic of freedom of speech in France. So I'm going to talk about, this is really a very short introduction to my thesis. So first I'm going to talk about the history of Charlie Hebdo. So Charlie Hebdo was launched by François Cavanagh and Georges Bernier in 1970, but before that the same team was already publishing another satirical monthly publication, a newspaper titled Harakiri, which started in 1960. So this is when Cavanagh, on the right, had a dream to create what he called a big, terrific, brilliant, funny paper along the lines of the impertinent American Mad magazine, which was launched in 1952. Cavanagh was dazzled, and he said, I was a big reader of Mad, especially the first issues. I was saying to myself, this is possible, we can do this, what they do in America, we can do here. So he executed his plan to do something, what I call him, to do something furious, something that hurts, something that does harakiri, a paper that makes fun of everything, a paper that doesn't care to be accused of bad taste, a big laugh. So a contribution to the evolution of the satirical press in France was to have introduced the publication to reflect a comparable or arguably even more abrasive spirit to Mad. Cavanagh combined the anarchic spirit of Mad magazine with that of the most violent French Belle Époque, Caricature. Hence, as Michel Argan points out, from 1881 to 1914, satirical reviews multiplied in France, of course. La Caricature in 1880, Le Rire in 1894, L'Assiette au beurre in 1900. The violence illustrated in the graphism as well as the expression made that period the golden age of caricature. We had to wait until 1960s and 1970s for the caricature to recover its vigor, its contesting power of the years called La Belle Époque. From L'Assiette au beurre to Harakiri to Charlie Hebdo, the spirit is the same, superbly recovered after a rather faint intermission of 50 years. So the term bête et méchant, stupid and mean, was first coined to label Harakiri's satirical ethos. In issue number 7, a reader sent a letter to Cavanagh, the editor-in-chief, saying, "Never have I read such a heap of insanities and foolishness. It's disgraceful. I'm suffocated with indignation. You disgrace the French press. You might be thinking you are very smart. Oh well, let me tell you that you are actually stupid and mean." So stupid and mean, bête et méchant. The reader's very expression of distaste for the papers, vulgar and puerile humor, was derided, twisted, and appropriated by the editor-in-chief, Cavanagh, to describe his own paper. Hence, he added the expression bête et méchant as a permanent subtitle, Harakiri, Journal bête et méchant, and later Charlie Hebdo, Journal bête et méchant. As for the title, Harakiri, short and shocking as it is, it aimed at articulating a fierce ambition to radically change the genre of journalism in France. Bête et méchant, Kavanagh clarified, we proclaimed our paper to be bête et méchant out of derision and out of disappointment of seeing idiocy and pettiness ruling everywhere under the cover of intelligence, good taste, dignity, love, kindness, because we were furious. So Harakiri covers were particularly scathing. I'm going to show you like a collage of the covers. Some of them are shocking and yeah, well, just going to do it. So good taste was undermined. The publication was created to challenge thematic and aesthetic bluntness through graphic images, deliberately utilizing scatological, sexually explicit material and elements of the grotesque. Charlie Hebdo, as we know it, is indeed a continuation of this unique and provocative, crass, brutal brand of humor, which mirrors deeper cultural perceptions in French society, and how satire functions as a powerful vehicle for culturally shaped ways of thinking and feeling peculiar to French society. So Harakiri was also subversive even in its layout, typography, and pagination. Its cartoon-based artwork consisted of elements of single panels and strip comics, bande dessinée, photomontage. Photomontage was a style unique to Harakiri. I'm going to do a very quick diaporama of the content of Harakiri, because these were the covers. Sometimes they are unrelated to the content of the newspaper, but I'm going to go very quickly through different pages of the publication to just give you an idea. So yeah, classical bande dessinée and caricature, and then they just take pictures from the news and add their own comment to distort things. And then classical comics, text, Les Aventures de Dieu, The Adventures of God, very anti-clerical. And then abstract works of art, or even vandalizing classic artworks. And yeah, as you see here, they also do counter-publicity because they establish themselves as fighting against the consumerist society. So they take like brands like Oliva is a brand for charcuterie, and they just make their own montage to distort the thing. Here they are making of fun of the Virgin Mary, and it's another caricature against the war. And it was also very, very anti-political. So the audacity of its sexually explicit and amoral tone in the context of Gaullist France became subject to government censorship on 2 occasions in the 1960s on the grounds of representing a danger under the 1949 law for the protection of youth morality. The authorities banned the display of Harakiri in kiosks and classified the paper as a publication dangerous for children and youth, almost pornographic and sadistic, a moral threat excessively pernicious. The regular reading of such a paper by the youth could, in the long run, undermine their fundamental values of society, love, nation, and religion. So, also the editors were advised to get rid of some of their contributors, like Topor and Fred, who used to design the covers for 2 years in the beginning, and then he quit the publication. So these 2 contributors were deemed incomprehensible, and the authorities advised the newspaper to get rid of them. So Kavanagh, the founder of Harakiri and Charlie Hebdo, was notably critical of post-war bande dessinée, having worked as a children's bande dessinée artist in the 1950s. He harshly criticized the moral sanitization of the medium in the context of post-war France, and he said it was a time for virtue, purity, and regeneration. Above all, it was vulgarity that was hunted down. Cartooning for very small children did not satisfy my profane appetites. I craved great, vengeful, sneering laughter. I had no outlet for my ferocities. I wanted to be Rabelais, and the only thing I was given to do was to keep young children smiling. So from the outset, Harakiri expressed an anti-clerical taste, which was recurrent through the monthly issues, and fitted well with other themes in the newspaper, which are anti-militarism, anti-establishment, anti-war, and anti-consumerism. More broadly, the dichotomy of left and right and party politics did not interest the founders of Harakiri and Charlie Hebdo. Kavanagh affirmed many times that the magazine upholds no ideology. We are humanists, he said, we are from the left, but we don't do politics. So this was a monthly newspaper which ran from 1960 to 1968. In 1968, it continued after that, but in 1968, the contributors felt restricted by a monthly appearance, wanted to have a weekly newspaper. So they launched l'Hebdo Harakiri, Hebdo simply means weekly, in 1968. What happened is, in 1970, Charles de Gaulle died, and the team decided to go for a rather very controversial cover that marked the death and the funeral, the media coverage of the funeral. So they marked the Général Charles de Gaulle. They were censored, of course, and banned from display in kiosks, which meant really financial problems for them and probably the death of the paper. So what they wanted to do is to skirt censorship and just change the title, and hence they changed it from l'Hebdo Harakiri to Charlie Hebdo, simply because they were already publishing a monthly newspaper called Charlie, which is a cartoon bande dessinée paper. So they ran from 1970 to 1982, but then in 1982, for financial reasons, and also Kavanagh said they lost their readership. People were not interested in their type of humor anymore, so they lost their readership and they had to shut down in 1982. But of course, that's not the end of Charlie Hebdo, because the rest of the contributors, the cartoonists and the caricaturists in the newspaper, turned to work in newspapers like Le Canard Enchaîné, L'Humanité, and Libération. Only together again around an anti-military magazine launched in 1991 called La Grosse Bertha. So internal conflicts in La Grosse Bertha led one of its contributors, Philippe Val, who is a key figure in the history of Charlie Hebdo, to quit and drag a group of the cartoonists with him. Most of them are ex-members of Charlie Hebdo. And this is when they got the idea to resurrect Charlie Hebdo again. However, they discovered that the intellectual property rights to the title Charlie Hebdo was never submitted to the French authorities. So there are two founders of Charlie Hebdo, Kavanagh and Georges Bernier. So Kavanagh said, it's mine, I invented it, and Choron said, no, it's mine, I did it. So there was a trial for 3 years, and finally the property went to Kavanagh. He was decided to be the inventor of Charlie Hebdo. And he had to concede the exploitation of the title Charlie Hebdo to a new editor, Philippe Val, under the irrevocable condition that the ideals of Charlie Hebdo will always be protected. And this is the first time that Kavanagh, or the editors, the founders of this publication, had to write down what are the ideals of this publication. So these ideals were four. Number one is the struggle for democracy and against every form of absolutism, including racism, xenophobia, sexism, exclusion, religious fanaticism, chauvinism, war, militarism, incite to hatred, leadership cults, and invasion of privacy. The second one is defense and illustration of rationalism and denunciation of all forms of obscurantism, of disinformation and idolatry. And number three is the defense of ecology, and Harakiri and Charlie Hebdo were the very first ecological, environmental newspaper publications in France. And number four, the defense of animal rights and the fight against hunting, fishing, corrida, and vivisection. So these are the four ideals of Charlie Hebdo. So with the new editor-in-chief, Charlie Hebdo continued the tradition of printing eye-catching and frequently provocative front-page covers featuring a single large-scale editorial cartoon. The targets were still the war in Kosovo, in Palestine, in Iraq, hunting and fishing, the European elections, the sects, the Republic, the presidents, Chirac, Sarkozy, Hollande, and animal rights. But many of these themes, but the most recurrent theme was basically the Catholic Church and Christianity. And these are covers from Harakiri to Charlie Hebdo, nothing changes. So the Pope, Jesus, these are covers under the editorship of Kavanagh, but these also are under him, and then Philippe Val, nothing changes, still the Pope and religions. These are covers under, no, actually cartoons under the Sharp, who was the editor-in-chief from 2009, 2007 to the attack. He died in the January attack, 2015. So Philippe Val, the one just before Sharp, the editor-in-chief before the Sharp, he was accused of holding political views deemed to be controversial and inconsistent. Which created tensions inside the team. So, of course, the expression of political opinion is not always explicit in the content when it comes to hard news. Rather, it's evident in the structure and selection of stories and the hierarchy of sources. Therefore, it's important to look at how opinion and preferred readings were inserted into the stories chosen by the editors of Charlie Hebdo, particularly considering the manner of singling out certain social questions. The main subject of my thesis is religion, but particularly Islam, and highlighting them above other as a way of foregrounding certain aspects of political perspective. So before I proceed, I just want to mention that something about the covers. So under Kavanagh, the founder of Charlie Hebdo, the covers were chosen unanimously. So all the contributors have to, present their covers. This is what we want to go for the cover, and they have to vote unanimously. If someone says no, I don't want this cover to go, I don't agree with this, the cover doesn't go into publication. But under Philippe Val, so everyone presents their covers, but Philippe Val has to say, oh, I want this one to go, and it's his responsibility. And this is what happened in 2006 when he decided to go for the controversial Mohammed cartoons. It was his own decision. So this was their most high-profile case to date, and it was under the editorship of Philippe Val. So the Charlie Hebdo defense team vigorously claimed the right to mock religion in the context of laïcité, regardless of the sensibilities of believers, which is an argument that is believed to appeal to the legacy of Bête et Méchant. So the editors, Val, but also later on Sharp, insisted in the no separation between Islamophobia and racism. So while acknowledging that Muslims have been increasingly the subject of hostility and racial discrimination, as well as governmental profiling, the editors argued that they could not be labeled or described as Islamophobic, because for them, Islamophobia is simply another face of racism. Sharp argued, editor-in-chief, that the sectarian militants who try to impose on the judiciary and political authorities the notion of Islamophobia don't have any other goal than to push the victims of racism to identify as Muslims. So that racists are as well Islamophobic, sorry, but that goes without saying. It's his quote. They are first racists, and through Islam it's actually the foreigner or the person with foreign origins that they target. In considering only the Islamophobic character in the racist individual, we minimize the racist threat. So, however, the 2007 Charlie Hebdo trial resulted in the newspaper's acquittal. In his verdict, the judge Jean-Claude Magendie situated the right to laugh within the broader accepted context of provocative satire in France, unstated. And I'm going to finish with this quote. So he said, I think I have it here, every caricature should be analyzed as a portrait which overcomes the taste to fill in a parodic function, whether in the burlesque mode or the grotesque one. The exaggeration functions then as a mode of pleasantry which allows it to skirt censorship, and to use irony as an instrument of social and political critique that invites judgment and debate. Do I have more time?
You actually have time.
Okay, so the question is, what is satire? Charlie Hebdo was acquitted because of this argument that what they were doing is satire. Satire, to me, sounds problematic, open-ended, essayistic, ambiguous in its relationship to history, uncertain in its political effect, resistant to formal closure, more inclined to ask questions than to provide answers, and ambivalent about the pleasure it offers. So satirists tend to propagandize for their own way of writing satire. That's why the founders of Charlie Hebdo, they said, our type of satire is called bête et méchant, stupid and mean. So in defense of his cartoon, the Mohammed cartoon that we all remember in 2006-2007, Cabu, the cartoonist, said, we simply want to express our laïcité. We are all atheists, but it's laïcité that unites us. People think we are anarchists, but Charlie Hebdo is not anarchist. It's simply Republican, and Republican laws are enough. France is lucky that the state is separate from religion. We hold on to that, and we want other countries to follow us. We draw what we want. The limit is private life, but definitely not religion. For us, every religion is an ideology, which means we can criticize all ideologies. We don't mock believers, we mock the fundamentalists. I will end with a question. Is the role of the satirist to be a moralist, like Cabu said? And should we look at the socioeconomic status of the satirist? Thank you.
And so we should go straight into our next paper, which is Tahnia Ahmed.
How do you access
Escape.
Thank you.
Are you going to do it from there?
Yeah, is that okay?
Okay, good. And her title for paper is Caricaturing the Other, Religious and Cultural Difference in Modern British Political Cartoons.
So before I begin, I just want to say that I clearly didn't prepare a presentation. I just sent in all the images I'm looking at. So I'm going to skip a lot of the slides. So apologies in advance. So my presentation looks at Muslim men and Muslim women. The first half will look at Muslim women, as we can see here already. And I look at how the burqa, which I define as the one kind of cloak, like garment that covers the whole body but keeps the face clear, and the niqab, which is the burqa with the face veil, are used interchangeably, reflecting a sense of ignorance about veiling in Islam, in political cartoons in Britain, but also it kind of demonstrates that actually they kind of are trying to say the same thing, cartoonists, by using the burqa and niqab interchangeably, is kind of making the same point. I also argue that by using the niqab and the burqa interchangeably, in my research, I don't actually see women in just simply headscarf. And by that I mean, just a scarf on her head, but with her cloak like just normal clothing. And I think that actually demonstrates an acceptance of hijab in British society. I think actually we've kind of moved on from that debate whether the headscarf is something that should be accepted, and actually now it's moved on from that to the burqa and niqab as being a litmus test for integration. I then look at Muslim men, and I look at how Muslim men have the image of Muslim man has changed in British political cartoons, obviously as the terror threat has changed. So I look at from 9/11, 7/7, and then obviously Daesh. Oh, sorry, already clicked. Okay, so this first image is in response to, I don't know if you guys remember, but in 2013 this was published. And this was in response to the fact that Elizabeth Breit, the only woman on any English banknote, was being removed and was going to be replaced by Winston Churchill. So the only woman who was going to be on a banknote would have been the Queen. Piers Cable, the then Business Secretary, also likened the Bank of England to fiscal policy to the Taliban. So here, Brooks is kind of commenting that actually these actions equate to this kind of idea that we are silencing the female kind of presence, the feminine presence in British society. And you can't, I don't know if you can see, but it says in the very same writing, it is truth universal knowledge that the Bank of England behaves like the Taliban. So that is a quote from Pride and Prejudice that Brooks has then kind of inserted the words of its Cable. And so it's interesting here how Brooks actually treats the very serious topic of sexual equality by using the veil as a tool to kind of underline how this has been undermined in our society. And actually, Jane Austen was then put on the Bank of England notes. The next cartoon is by Matt from Day Terror. And this is in response to the banning of the burqa in France. And it's actually, so it's a situation in France, and the irony of a little boy whose eyes are being covered by his mother cannot actually see, like the fact that some people have their breasts out is fine for the mother, but the fact that someone's fully clothed is too much for the mother, for her son to see. And so it's kind of this juxtaposition of actually in this picture where actually the reader is being asked to actually empathise with the burqa-clad woman. In a way, it actually serves to highlight how ridiculous the situation is, that actually you are free to choose what not to wear, but when you choose to cover yourself, you are actually being chased for it by the police. I think also it does relate to how British read French and how actually there's a long history of, caricaturing French and kind of make them seem really ridiculous, which I don't say I agree with, but whatever. Another Mac cartoon here, and this is in response to a college in Birmingham lifting ban on face veil, and the caption refers to a very British tradition of taking a school photo, and the irony here is that actually everyone is wearing the face veil, so actually when they take the school photo, presumably you won't know who is who. It's interesting because actually in this context there are really young girls here. If you look at the top, it says class 8C, so year 8, so girls from 12 to 13. They are choosing to be taught in a Western educational establishment by a Caucasian male teacher. So it's interesting because actually, in a way, I think this is quite an interesting picture, this cartoon, because Matt is trying to say, well, these are girls choosing to be educated, but at the same time, they've chosen to take on this garb. And I think it kind of highlights the fact that actually, what does the lifting of the ban on veils in schools mean for British society? What does it mean? Is it a question of British identity, or is it a question of religious freedoms? Are we actually kind of trying to marry the two together, and does it work? The next one is by Mac from the Daily Mail, and this is a response to the then Environment Secretary Caroline Spelman, who said in an article about how she felt that being able to choose what you wear, for a woman to choose what she can wear in the morning, is actually empowering. These words were picked up by the press, and so in response, Mac draws this cartoon, and it's ironic because here's a woman who's literally tied to the kitchen sink, washing the dirty plates, while her husband asks if she wants to be empowered, and clearly he means by does she want to wear the headscarf, or be veiled, perhaps, so to speak. So I think here it highlights that actually, I think words can be misconstrued, but it also highlights the fact that there's a focus and concentration of the idea of oppression of women in certain societies, that actually I think here Mac is highlighting that actually female oppression can happen in different societies, and this is a way of kind of highlighting that actually that you can be Caucasian, you don't have to be veiled, you don't have to be Muslim in order to be oppressed by men in different ways. The next cartoon kind of moves on from the debate of the oppression of women and looks at the burqa as a way of disguise and deception. And I never thought I'd say this, but now she's a Prime Minister, Theresa May, and she at the time she was the Home Secretary, and her remit was also anti-terror legislation. And here, this is in response to Mohammed, I can't remember his name, Mohammed Abed Mohammed, I think. He was able to escape really strict anti-terror investigation measures, which are called T-PIMs, by literally going to mosque, coming out in burqa, and just evading the authorities. And it's just, it's incredible that someone under such tight kind of observation could do something so simple and get away with it. And also it kind of worries, it's kind of a worry for the British public if someone who is so dangerous can get away with it so quickly and easily. And this reflects this idea that actually perhaps the Home Secretary at the time was trying to evade her responsibility as Home Secretary for the fact that someone could get away with that so easily. And the only thing that gives her away here is the fact that she's got red ministerial box and she's got her leopard heels, which is a very iconic thing of Theresa May. And this is another cartoon by Matt, which comments on the same thing. And the fact that it's a cat in a burqa, the fact that the cat's tail is clearly visible. Again, I think with Brooks's cartoon, he's making a very political point. I mean, it's the Times. With Matt, he's making, I mean, it's a Telegraph again, but and they're kind of more perhaps pro-conservatives, but he's making perhaps he's poking fun, I think, more at the situation. So the next part of my presentation looks at Muslim men, and I argue that actually the difference between Muslim women and Muslim men is that there's a focus on ethnicity with men. And that's, you can see that in the attire. So they wear the tupi, which is a lot of South Asian men wear that, not just Muslim men, but they wear like a round, usually white cap. They wear the salwar kameez, which actually I'm wearing today, loose trousers and a long shirt. And also sometimes Arab clothing, like the long garment that a lot of men in the Middle East wear. And I argue that actually, for Muslim women, the debate is about religion, because I think the burqa is identifiably Muslim. When it comes to articles of clothing like salwar kameez, you don't have to be Muslim to wear the salwar kameez. You don't have to be, you can be anything really. And it's more to do with where you are from kind of the world rather than your religious background. And I think that portrays a very monolithic kind of transnational Asian culture that is perceived to be linked to Islam in the next images. So I'm going to skip the next ones. So in the aftermath of 9/11, there's actually a feeling of sympathy with the American public in the cartoon. So here you can see the Statue of Liberty weeping, you see the Twin Towers on fire, and then you see this huge contrast of how actually there are identifiable political figures laughing at this event. And I think here Brooks is trying to make a very political statement. He's making a very bold statement by saying that these men who actually, at the time and even afterwards, apart from no, actually Bin Laden's not there. Oh yeah, Bin Laden is there. Apart from Bin Laden, none of them actually claimed responsibility for the attacks. They weren't responsible for them. But he actually pits these very recognisable Muslim leaders as being against the West. I think it's a very, very bold, very political statement to make, and it actually puts Islam in a very negative manner. I don't think it's an accident that the Ayatollah is in there, for example. And even then, the Ayatollah was never friends with any of these guys anyway. But he's apparently on their side. I think these cartoons as well kind of give, when readers look at these cartoons, they're given an image of what the Muslim is like, but not who the Muslim is. So I think there's this idea of the media-generated Muslim. And in these pictures, the Muslim male is portrayed as an active agent of terror. In the previous images of a Muslim woman, she was actually she wasn't involved in terrorist activities, and she's quite passive. It's all about her rights. It's about kind of how she interacts with society rather than with major events like this. So the next image is by Nicholas Garland, and this one's interesting because here Elias is addressing British Muslims. I think it's really important that the caption talks about British Muslims and not just Muslims. Muslims are being identified as part of being society in this country, and it's evocative of the very famous Alfred Leap World War I poster with Lord Kitchener, and it's kind of appealing to their patriotism, of British Muslims, that actually they're part of the solution. There's something that you guys can do about this, and your Prime Minister is on your side. It's interesting as well, it's actually the Daily Telegraph, someone who's not very pro-Labour, is actually kind of portraying the Prime Minister who is Labour in a very sympathetic and positive light. However, I think post 7/7 there's a bit of a difference, and the fact that the attacks were carried out by British Muslim men kind of leads cartoonists to take a very introspective view of the situation. And I think prior to that, British society took it for granted that a British Muslim would never do something like that. Like someone who's fully integrated into society would never want to then retaliate in that way. And 7/7 really showed that that was not true. So this one, for example, shows the kind of knee-jerk reaction of the British public. You know, they're all Caucasian to your left, and there's a lone Asian man. And again, his articles of clothing, he's brown, he's got falconies on, and he looks really sad. And mind the gap is playing on words, because on the tube we talk about mind the gap between the train and the platform. Here we're talking about the gap between the Muslim and the non-Muslim in British society. The next one. So contrast this one with that was by Nicholas Garland to this one. Post 7/7, now you have this idea that actually British Muslims are refusing to integrate, and they refuse to be part of the solution. That they need to literally be dragged from the fog of the past into the future, into the 21st century. And there's Tony Blair, the then Prime Minister, and Ken Clarke, who was Charles Clarke. Sorry, thank you, Charles Clarke. Before my time, there was Charles Clarke, the then Home Secretary, looking on. And it's interesting because again, the Muslim guy is in he's in a thobe, but he's not thank you, he's not dressed in Western clothing. And I think what is really interesting is the fact that actually the 7/7 bombers wore Western clothing. They were not dressed like this or in Salkanis. They were very, very British, so to speak, or Westernized. So now, like Nicholas Garland is saying that actually, forget the British Muslims that I spoke about a few years ago. They're not winning, and we need to drive them. So I'm going to skip below this one. Again, this is another one by Nicholas Garland, and here again he's trying to call on British Muslims or Muslims in Britain, perhaps, kind of depending on where he stands now, to be like, well, actually, you guys really need to speak up about this. You need to, in a way, apologise for what's happening around the world. And it's interesting because we have, Not In My Name and all that. And the High Street is a very British institution. The fact that the High Street is falling and failing in Britain is quite was a big government agenda. And their placards, say no to terror. And they're literally all clones of themselves. The women are in burqa, the men are all bearded and angry. And I think the fact that the men have this angry expression kind of portrays the fact that they're not, that they should be very angry. I'm going to quickly go on to images of Daesh and how actually no longer is a man visible, no longer is a Muslim male visible, but he's dressed in black. This idea of the black guard being identified with ISIS. And here you have a UKIP clown and the ISIS jihadi fighter, who both are intolerant for different reasons. The UKIP clown intolerant of cultural diversity, the ISIS guy intolerant of religious diversity, or any kind of diversity actually. Again, another one, Multiculturalism is so bracing. These are all cartoons that actually kind of speak about the lack of humanity of the Muslim male. And I argue, and I'd love to hear your feedback, that actually, because now the Muslim male has lost his face, his identity, because of the way Daesh kind of wants to represent its fighters, that actually is a lack of humanity that the person's lost. Is no longer about whether this person's been integrated sufficiently into British society. It's like, where has the humanity gone? And this is visualised in the way he's dressed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was great. Thank you so much. And now our third and final paper of the panel. And we have Rhonda Breit from our own School of Communications. And her title is Satire, Freedom of Expression and Multiculturalism, Analysing the Limits of Humour.
So I'm sorry, I'm just...
You can close the close.
I just can't see very well. Okay. Oh, hang on, where am I? It's not Mac.
I know.
And fantastic. There we go. Okay. Now, I'm terribly sorry. I do have to apologise because this is a work in progress. So I'm really looking forward to your feedback, and I'm going to have to read certain sections of it because it is areas that I'm not 100% familiar with. So please bear with me. So in essence, I'd like to set out the aims of my paper. I'd like to sort of problematise the use of satire in what Nancy Fraser describes as the transnational public sphere. The space where, in essence, we don't have a nation state anymore, that we have this globalised environment where public opinion is formed. And so the paper draws on the concept of unlaughter, a concept that's been used in analysis of humour, particularly in folklore, and I want to use this concept to analyse the limits of humour in this broader space that we've talked, which has been phrased the transnational public sphere. So I'm going to draw on the concepts of unlaughter, and then adopting the critique of Habermas's notion of public sphere, articulated by Nancy Fraser, I want to question the normative legitimacy of public opinion around the Charlie Hebdo cartoons, drawing on the concepts of inclusiveness and participatory parity. As I said, a work in progress, and your feedback is really, really important to me. Just like to position the events, and I think you all know what's happened around the Charlie Hebdo situation in January 2015. It was preceded by a number of cartoons that depicted the Prophet Muhammad. The attack generated a massive expression of support for the paper, and it was seen as an attack on freedom of expression. There was a rally of national unity, and people describe themselves as "Je suis Charlie," I am Charlie. So the notion of public sphere is really crucial to this analysis because it ascertains it articulates how public opinion is formed, and it ascertains the limits of the individual rights in France's unique form of secularism, laïcité, and the legitimacy of public opinion in the transnational public sphere. Here I will use the concept of unlaughter to analyse the Charlie Hebdo's cartoons depicting the Prophet Muhammad, arguing that the members of the Muslim community were never intended to be part of the joke. Their failure to laugh at the rest of France further marginalised this community, already alienated by religion, customs and ideology, not to mention some of the socio-economic issues associated with immigration. The subsequent groundswell of support sparked by the killing spree further marginalised this community. They were seen as incomplete citizens who could not take a joke, who could not laugh at themselves. Their religion became synonymous with terrorism. These people were not French. Je suis Charlie became a metaphor for belonging. If you were not Charlie, you were not French. So you see that the depictions that this was not just a war on humour, it was a war on freedom. But then we fast forward to a situation very recently, and we see people distancing themselves from the controversial publication Charlie Hebdo. The Italians were condemned Charlie for depicting the victims of the earthquake as pasta. The solidarity formed after the Muhammad cartoons has started to disintegrate, with headlines now declaring "No longer Charlie," as the joke failed, and the paper suffered a serious backlash for displaying such bad taste. Beyond bad taste, Charlie's cartoon was also seen as a betrayal, a slap in the face to the Italians who'd rallied to support publication after the January 2015 cartoons. So I'd like to just take a moment to say, well, who is Charlie? And our colleague here has done an excellent job in setting out the historical sort of foundations of it. But Charlie describes itself as a punch in the face. So it's intentionally positioning itself as a violent publication, a metaphorically violent publication. We are a punch in the face against those who try to stop us thinking, against those who fear imagination, against those who don't like us to laugh. So in essence, it's othering those people that are not able to get humour. And it's already situating a situation of saying that if you don't get it, you don't belong, you're not part of us. And if you go into their website, you will see where they respond to criticism in a way that says, well, if you don't like our sense of humour, we don't care, because you're not part of us and you're not really a part of the community, you're an outsider. So I want to explore the discursive environments in which public opinion is formed. Public opinion plays an essential role, as we all know, in the shared norms, social values and customs, which lie at the heart of the legal and ethical limits of acceptable action and inaction. Publicity is supposed to discredit views that cannot withstand critical scrutiny and assure legitimacies of those views that can. And these shared norms, values and customs form the foundation of what we would see as the ethical limits of behaviour and human interaction. In France, freedom of expression enjoys an exalted position as one of the most important constitutional liberties. It's designed to contribute to the formation of public opinion while sustaining pluralism. The state and public institutions are neutral. People are free to choose their religious affiliations and their non-affiliations. Religious choice, however, is regarded as a private matter. A person's right to express opinions publicly is only limited by the need to ensure public order. So analysing the Charlie Hebdo cartoons from the perspective of rights is really quite problematic, as it gives rise to a series of what we would call contestations around issues like the neutrality of state, respect for pluralism, religious liberty, freedom of expression and peaceful coexistence. It also heightens the challenges between individual rights of citizens to freedom of expression and the community rights of a particular religious group, such as the Islamic model, which are dependent on the values of the community as a whole. So in France, freedom of expression trumps all other rights unless it will disrupt public order. Speech will not be restricted, even if it's highly offensive or distasteful. Restrictions are permissible, however, if speech incites violence or disrupts public order. This is where the public sphere becomes so crucial, as it is the discursive space where norms are renegotiated as part of the changing global geography. So Nancy Fraser, as I mentioned earlier, problematises the concept of public sphere and its role in formation of public opinion in this multicultural or transnational world, where the discursive environments extend beyond nation states and transcend the traditional spatial and temporal boundaries envisioned by Habermas. Habermas's public sphere was characterised by bounded territory, an homogenous political community, a capitalist market economy regulated by state, a national media and a national language. Fraser's thoughtful essay on the transnational public sphere questions the translatability of this discursive environment in a space characterised by global mobility and immigration, a global economy, transnational communication, linguistic diversity, the formation of transnational institutions which subsume national law, and the new religious geography where people from different religions are living together and having to renegotiate established norms. So according to Fraser, two key elements or factors affect the normative legitimacy of the communicative power and public opinion formed in this space. And there are several aspects, but I'm going to focus on the notion of inclusiveness and participatory parity to actually highlight the fact that these cartoons had were a at least a very divisive role in the formation of public opinion if not a role in actually constituting incitement towards violence. Public opinion is legitimate if and only if it results from a communicative process in which all potentially affected can participate as peers, regardless of political citizenship. Discussion must be open to all who have a stake in the outcome. This is how Fraser explains this notion of inclusiveness. Moreover, she argues, all stakeholders must enjoy roughly equal chances to state their views, place issues on the table, question the tacit and explicit assumptions of others, switch levels when needed, and generally receive a fair hearing. Here the concept of unlaughter helps us to analyse the legitimacy of public opinion around Charlie Hebdo cartoons, and to help us evaluate what I would argue are the limits of humour in a transnational public sphere. Unlaughter, as described by Maura Smith, is used deliberately to highlight differences between joke participants based on their reaction to the joke. According to Smith, shared humour that meets with support from all members, contributes to social solidarity. But when the joke targets outsiders, the marginalised or the minority groups, shared laughter is not always an expected outcome, and I would argue in this case it was not. In her analysis of the 2006 Danish cartoons, Smith argued that some jokes are not intended to be funny. Some humorous events are designed to include some people in shared laughter, but to exclude others, thereby heightening social boundaries. The effect is to further marginalise outsiders, those who do not get the joke, because they are flawed, incomplete individuals who lack a sense of humour. According to Smith, these 2007 Danish cartoons took the boundary heightening capacity of unlaughter to another level. Sense of humour became an indicator of the personality failings not just of an individual, but of entire nations conceived as a unitary civilisation. So instead of trying to prioritise the competing rights around the use of satire in religious comment, the concept of unlaughter asks us to look or to focus on how the joke is received. In terms of Charlie Hebdo, I suggest that the cartoon was not intended to be funny to the Muslim community. In this way, the joke heightened barriers between the French who got the joke and the Muslims who lacked a sense of humour. Audience solidarity in the 2015 situation was generated or garnered in three ways. First, by bringing people together who got the joke, those who could see the humour in depictions of Muhammad. Secondly, solidarity was garnered around the fight for freedom of expression and the right to offend the humourless religious group. Finally, social solidarity emerged as a response to violence inflicted on the Charlie Hebdo cartoonists. The solidarity emerged because of a reaction not just to humour, but to violence, the attack on freedom of expression and being part of a joke. In all of these instances, the members of the Muslim community were further marginalised from secular France. Given the social exclusion resulting from the triple impact of unlaughter, the fight against censorship and reaction to violence, the Muslim community was deprived of what I would suggest an ability or a right to reply. They were communicatively marginalised, and any legitimate response was negated because they lacked a sense of humour, they were trying to censor cartoonists, and ultimately they were terrorists. This discourse emerged in other French media. Just this year, a study analysed the French public broadcaster F24, which and their depiction of Muslim in the reporting of the Charlie Hebdo killings. And they concluded that the coverage reduces Muslims to religious beings who isolate themselves from the society. French Muslims are the undeserving citizens of France. This discourse marginalised Muslims socially, politically and legally. The F24 emphasis on the connection between Islam and terrorism, this paper argues, perpetuates the image of Arabs and Muslims as what they see as a negative other. It is often said that the pen is mightier than the sword, and I think that the Charlie Hebdo cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad are an excellent example of how this power works. Despite the use of extreme violence by two unrepresented members of the Muslim community, Muslims around the world remain marginalised as a community who lack humour, who cannot get a joke, who try to censor critics, and people ultimately who are seen as terrorists. But in conclusion, I would like to suggest that this version of public opinion lacks legitimacy because the Muslim community was intentionally excluded from the joke. Charlie Hebdo knew and was on notice that it was not seen as funny. It was never intended that they would find it funny, and the paper had been defending its right to publish such cartoons since 2007 when they were sued for insulting Islam. So they were on notice. The fact that the Muslim community did not like the cartoon raised this notion of unlaughter and a suggestion that they were incomplete. The combined effect of unlaughter, perceived censorship, and the reaction to violence perpetuated against Charlie Hebdo heightened social boundaries in France. The combined discourse depicted Muslims as the negative other, the undeserving citizen who refused to be part of French society. Charlie Hebdo knew this group did not get the joke. They knew that they would not laugh. And if they did not know, then they should have had reasonable grounds to suspect that the cartoons could promote violence against the paper itself and possibly others. This process of othering arising from the fact that Muslims did not get the joke and they were not really French, that, as I mentioned earlier, the Muslim community lost its opportunity for a right to reply. So in light of this analysis, it is argued that Charlie Hebdo's action did constitute incitement because violence was a reasonably foreseeable consequence of publication of the cartoons. In such circumstances, the publication might have had a legal right to publish, but I think we all have to question, was it reasonably exercised? Finally, I would suggest that there were other ways that Charlie Hebdo could have achieved the same ends without causing the pain and suffering endured by those who lost their lives, those who lost their loved ones, and those who felt affronted because of the offence to their religious beliefs. So this analysis suggests that the communicative power across the transnational public sphere is imbalanced. As the Charlie Hebdo cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad illustrate, Muslim communities suffer from a series of othering experiences through public discourse, within Charlie Hebdo itself and accompanying media. These othering events include failure to get a joke, which they were never intended to laugh at, attacking freedom of expression and individual rights, to lampoon religion, and being terrorists. And from that controversial note, I will finish.
Thank you very much. And because of our extremely efficient and conscientious speakers, we actually have lots of time for questions. So what I'd suggest as well, we already have one hand up. Go ahead.
All three papers were excellent, but my question goes to Imen, because I can't wrap my head around for me it's an oxymoron to have bête et méchante, stupid and whatever, and then satire, because the definition of satire is that it is intelligent way to present humor, and it makes you think, and if you're not intelligent you will simply not get the joke regardless of whether you belong into a certain group or not. So how do these two concepts reconcile, because they are basically an oxymoron?
Thank you. So, so you think they are contradictory, bête et méchant and satire?
Especially the bête.
Stupid. Yeah, I think I will go back to, because Charlie Hebdo, once they were censored in not Charlie Hebdo, Arabi in 1960, and the authorities mocked them, and they told, this was in Kavanagh's memoirs or autobiography. They were like, but you proclaim yourselves Breit des Méchants. You yourself said you are Breit des Méchants. And then this is when the editors and probably the team realized that actually they were misunderstood. What they meant by Breit des Méchants isn't like, oh, we are stupid and mean, but we want to highlight what is stupid and mean in society, and we want to mock that, ridicule it. So this is what stupid and mean actually is. It's in itself an irony. It's kind of rhetorical, so it's not as far Breit des Méchants. It's what we see around us, is everything that we see is Breit des Méchants, and this is what we want to. But also, can I go back to the slides? Yeah. I want to show the. Yeah, this is the they started drawing. This appeared in the very first issues. This is the first issue of Al-Hakimi, and inside there is this samurai. Maybe he's doing the Al-Hakimi ritual of suicide, Japanese suicide, and out of it is this little creature who is smiling in a very sneaky, stupid way. And since then, they took this out and put it everywhere in a little format under in the first page and also inside the publication. This is what Breit des Méchants for them means. So it's like so if you can see the creature, it's like heavy. It's trying to it's opening its stomach to just suicide, but he's smiling, which is for that it just summarizes what is Breit des Méchants for them. It's not against them, it's against the society. So I don't think I see any contradiction because it's all ironical. Yeah, thank you for the question.
I've got a couple of questions. I'll start with you and then I'll get back to you. It's more like a comment than an observation.
Are these combined questions, or can we?
It's sort of combined. It connects it to the second one. Stanley Fish has got a book or a chapter which it says freedom of speech. There is no such thing as freedom of speech, and it's a good thing too. So the argument is that freedom of speech philosophically it cannot be absolute, and he's giving lots of instances of how it was perceived as not absolute, but it was portrayed as something which could be absolutely exercised. And I'm wondering to what extent was this really discussed within the context of Charlie Hebdo inside the French circle. So going back to your point, this is rather a meta question instead of just focusing on what you presented. What I noticed is that if you look at the history of the laicite and the French, after the French Revolution, there is this kind of psychological attachment to attacking religion in the name of laicite, and they don't seem to have really moved on. It seems as if still, even after the Catholic Church is no longer there is no power, the separation of church and state is there, and these guys are basically powerless in the French Republic. They continue to attack something which is politically powerless, and you are attacking the powerless. And that is in the name of satire, in the name of freedom of speech. So there is no threat on the side of these people. It is provocation, and it's still continuing. It was meant to be, satire was meant to be criticizing power. Now it is turning against the powerless, and it's provoking the powerless, and it's leading to another cycle of violence, and it continues and it never ends. So it would be something interesting to see how psychologically the French have not really moved on. It's as if they're living in 2 centuries ago. They're continuing the same idea over and over again, and it doesn't come to an end.
Might have to ask the French about that. As an Australian that is trying to analyse.
No, I'm not talking about a nation. The intellectual discourse seems to be going over this. Maybe it exists, but politically the expressions of it, it's still there. It's as if they haven't moved on, really.
Look, I think it's a fair comment in terms of the ascertaining the of freedom of expression. It's a constantly contested space, and you have legal limits and then you have ethical limits, and I think it's those ethical limits that fail to be explored in an environment that is radically changing because of the social movements of the contemporary era. And it's a conversation that we need to have in many more places, I would suggest.
Okay, so I'm focusing on Charlie Hebdo, its history, its content, its discourse, images, texts, and everything. But I'm also focusing on the context in my research. So I'm gonna tell you my findings, and then you can interpret them as you wish. But so I'm looking at the whole publication. What happened is Harakiri established itself as an anti-political publication. It's one of its main themes. They were attacking Jesus, they were attacking the religious figures, but also they were attacking the Pope and the Catholic Church frequently. And you would argue that, at the time in the 60s and 70s, the Catholic Church is no longer a powerful institution, and it's not punching up, it's punching down. I think these are early days and this is work in progress. What I think I'm going to focus on is the difference between attacking religion and attacking the Pope. Because even if the Catholic Church is no longer, if religion is no longer, the society has shifted and appropriated new values, which is laicity. But it doesn't mean that the Catholic Church is not powerful, is not still powerful, or the Pope is not it still has agency. So I think they are different. My analysis of the first years, especially Harakiri 1960 to 1970, is when they attacked the Catholic Church or religion, they attacked it from universal terms or approaches. It's religion, it's an ideology. We had a revolution to eliminate this. It's laicity, it's the separation of state and church, and everything. From 1960 to 1982, when Charlie Hebdo stopped publishing and went bankrupt and lost its readership, there wasn't a single cover or caricature on Muslims because Muslims were not a problem at the time. So they are not visible in the public sphere. They haven't become a question in the French society. I want to just seize the opportunity to just answer one of your questions is, and also it's relevant here. Kavana, when they stopped publishing in 1982, they were invited in French TV to droit de réponse, so the right to answer. What happened? They said, we lost our readership. And he said, I'm going to address a message, but not to the public, to our readers, because we had a very narrow readership. So we don't care if people don't read us. We care if our readers stop reading us. So they wanted to establish a certain readership, and they did in the beginning, because their message was, and their content, or the way they make meaning, was relevant in Charles de Gaulle, France. But after May 68, it's not the case anymore, and then the society evolved, and even their readers evolved. So it's not that just the society, even their readers, they don't find their humor funny anymore, and they stopped buying the paper. What happened is there was a break of 10 years, and then they got back to publishing again. And then there was the war, the Gulf War, there was the 2001, 9/11, and there was the veil. The veil question started in 1989 in Trail, and Charlie Hebdo didn't exist at the time. They were not publishing, and they 3 years later they resurrected. So when they started again, they found that there are new questions now. the Muslims have become a question. So their concern on religion is from pressing current problem. And the thing is, the difference between Harakiri and Charlie Hebdo, because I'm studying the evolution of their discourse, is in the beginning they said we're not political. They didn't do politics. So when you read Harakiri or Charlie Hebdo in the beginning, it's like it's talking about things that are not necessarily related to what's going on in the society, in politics at the time. But when Charlie Hebdo went weekly, they started covering these issues. And when they relaunched in 1982, they were more and more political. And I think the choice of the editor-in-chief is very, very important. It's like it's one of the key elements in the shift in the way Charlie Hebdo handles the Muslim question. But in the beginning, they had absolute freedom to talk about whatever they want. Under Philippe Val and Charles, there was an editorial line. One of their very weird, strange claims is that they say, "Oh, we don't have an editorial line. We are a newspaper that doesn't have an editorial line. We have certain ideals we want to defend, and that's it. We are free to do what they want." So I think what I'm going to do is look at this and not take it for granted, because there must be an editorial line. And one of the agenda is to react to what's going on in society, in politics, Muslims.
So there's one question there.
Okay, hello. Actually, can I ask two different questions, quite very brief, or not?
Well, it also depends on how brief the response will be. Right?
Okay, I will try to keep well. My first question is to Imen. Because you gave us all this background of Charlie Hebdo, I was quite interested to ask you a very specific question, which is, I mean, I'm not really knowledgeable about the newspaper, but I always got this idea about that for those producing it, the freedom of expression was something unlimited. But I found it interesting that at some point in your presentation you mentioned that for them ideology and religion was something that they could really satire and make jokes about. But you did mention that somehow they had a kind of a limit, because you said that, for instance, private life. So I would like to know a bit more how they conceptualized the limit of what they could or could not cross. Okay. And my second question, very briefly, would be to Rhonda. I would like to know more about, you used the concept of transnational public opinion.
Public sphere.
Yeah, public sphere, which, sometimes I have a problem with these concepts that take us to this post-state era, because I'm not really sure we're there or we are going there. But it has become a kind of a buzzword everywhere. But when you apply it to what you were describing, my question would be, at the same time as I see it, the phenomenon of Charlie Hebdo, it's really a product somehow of French culture, and how public opinion in France really relates to the idea of freedom of expression. So how would you somehow put this together?
So do you want me to go first?
Why don't you go first?
Jamal, could I
ask
a question?
So, okay, go ahead. Absolutely.
Yeah,
it's related to that, actually.
It's directed more at Rhonda, but it's open to everyone as well. I'm grappling with the idea of this public sphere, and the fact that, and this concept of unlaughter and the exclusion of certain groups. But I guess humor, jokes, satire always picks someone to laugh at. So someone is always the butt of the joke, usually. So on that basis, I'm just wondering whether you can ever even talk about satire if you're not, if someone's not being being a caricature, for example.
The concept of unlaughter actually addresses that issue, is that quite often the butt of the joke will go along with the joke. But if they don't, then it is this concept of unlaughter. So if the joke participant plays along, and in Moira Smith's article, she gives two examples of the practical joke, where she talks of a practical joke played on Tom Cruise and a practical joke played on Sharon Osbourne. And in both jokes they were squirted with water through a microphone. Tom Cruise failed to engage with the joke and said it was offensive. The action was offensive and rude. Sharon Osbourne played along with the joke and ran after the practical joker. So Osbourne chose to participate in the joke. Cruise chose not to, and that's the concept of unlaughter, in that they're excluded and they're not part of it, and so they didn't find it funny. So they were, and the resulting coverage of Cruise characterised him as a person without a sense of humour, and the consequent publicity around Osbourne was that she was a funny, good person because she could take a joke. So they were, Cruise was seen as a person that was ridiculed because he was short, ridiculed because he lacked sense of humour, and he had these demeaning characteristics that made him less of a human being. So that's the concept of unlaughter, and I think that I'm playing with it at the moment, in that I think it actually can be taken to the Charlie Hebdo, because it's very clear that there was notice that the people did not find this issue funny. So I hope that helps to explain the fact that it actually relates to all joke participants. In terms of the transnational public sphere, I think what you see is that there's actually a different geography within France, and whilst there is a unique interpretation of freedom of expression and the right to criticise and ridicule religious institutions and activities, you see a changing geography within France, and it's a question as to whether or not those norms are actually translatable to that environment now, or whether they need to be renegotiated. So it's really a tool to discuss and analyse it, and you look at the legitimacy of the public opinion that is being formed in terms of its inclusiveness of engaging all parties who want to be involved in that discussion, have a stake in that discussion, and their capacity to participate in parity in terms of having an equal say. And the basic premise is that unlaughter gives the Muslim community less of a say, and we have to see whether or not people would agree with it.
Absolutely.
So I want to ask you, or maybe it's just a thought, but I feel like we kind of take away the responsibility of the audience and their response to a joke or whatever. So if Muslims or whoever responded in a violent way to the cartoons didn't ascribe any importance to the cartoons, they wouldn't be violent. So in a way, even if the cartoonists knew that there would be a backlash against that, it doesn't mean that that backlash has to be violence.
No.
And then at the same time, I feel like in a parallel kind of way, ISIS do the same thing. So they know how the West will react to beheadings and stuff like that, and they have it's a pretty much a stage show. And the way we retaliate or react is by publishing it in papers and giving them more publicity.
Absolutely. I don't think that this is an isolated argument, and I'm certainly not saying that this is the only, Charlie Hebdo is the only organisation that uses this. But I would suggest that given the violence that had preceded and the attempts on the life of the Danish cartoonist, there was certainly from my very basic recollections of criminal law, that it would be reasonably foreseeable that people would react violently. And I'm not in any way defending the extremist action. I think it's abhorrent. But we have to question whether or not that was a responsible usage or republication of those images, given the history. And it was a long history from at least 2006.
Jump in with a very short question, but would that mean that they shouldn't be published.
No, what I said is I think that there are other ways that it could have been published. And, I think that we see examples of being able to do things in a way that is less offensive, and even to the extent of not putting it on the front page. Like I often think about, use my own experience as a mother, where newspapers took away my ability to expose my son to talking about death, because on the front page there was this photograph of a murdered human being with blood pouring out of it, right? And my son comes running in as a 3-year-old going, "Mummy, what's this?" So it's looking at positioning and responsibility. I think they could have had cartoons, but there are other ways of depicting or critiquing the issue or satirising the issue without actually using the image of the prophet, is what I would say. And there was history that this was highly offensive. So why should they republish it and stretch the boundaries when the joke was just not there?
May I use my prerogative to actually join the discussion? But I think it comes back to, though, the issue, I think, perhaps of public sphere and a transnational public sphere, in the sense that, again, we're focusing obviously on Muslims, but this doesn't occur entirely about Muslims, right?
No.
And so that in terms of, again, using your term, whether punching up or punching down, Charlie Hebdo and others, sort of like, again, it occurs within the context of whether or not there's a freedom to offend in Denmark, right? So that's one thing, which then affects France. But it also occurs in the context of actually targeting minorities, targeting African immigrants, immigration generally, the poor, welfare, cheats, people who are taking from the dole, all these things, which Charlie Hebdo does all these things. And I just wonder also, if you might want to think more or talk more about, and not necessarily here because we're running close to the end of time, but about the issue of where and how did they define public space? Because I don't know very much about this, but my sense is that one of the signature cases for Charlie Hebdo was when they made fun of Sarkozy's son's conversion to Judaism, and they fired someone who had been, one of their absolute most important staff members was fired for that.
And to answer his question, this is private life.
But it's not private life. The president's son is not a private citizen.
Well,
no,
that's where it becomes a problem.
That's Philippe Valls. Philippe Valls' argument. This is private life. You didn't attack Sarkozy. You attacked his son. You attacked his son because he's engaged to a Jewish woman, and now you're going to become rich, and that's the joke that was not accepted.
But that's not actually private. You see, but that's, I agree with you and I understand. But couldn't one also make the argument that this is also a public comment on French society? But this one gets interpreted as private life. But and this becomes it's obviously a moot point because we don't know what would have happened. But had he married, a Kuwaiti woman, it would not have played out the same way, right? So there's that point. I'm related to that. I was just, I'm using my prerogative massively here, but related. I was fascinated by your gendering of actual representation, and one thing I'm struck by, because this is sometimes part of wider thought about this, and I'm just wondering if this is something you're actually also doing, which is that. Frequently, what happens is that there's the construction of sort of how brown women and brown men get constructed, in this case Muslim primarily, is that the women are to be saved by turning them into us, and the men are irredeemable. So there's nothing about saving actually men. And this you should, when wondering, sometimes one should perhaps think of it in terms of, and it's not just about this, I didn't invent this. It's about the broader treatment, actually, of non-whites, of certain categories. So I know this very well from the U.S., but there are several cases in which you'll actually see this, in which you basically give up on black boys in elementary school, and you work on the girls. So you're trying to transform the societies through the transformation of the women. So you save the women as the tool to transforming society. That one cartoon you had in which the being dragged into the, the kicking and screaming, being dragged. That's exactly it, right? Men cannot be, males are not to be convinced, males are not to be changed.
And
But women
it's
also-
hard to contain as well. They're hard
Yeah,
to contain.
they're hard to, so yeah.
While the woman is easier to guide her.
But but it goes beyond the just, I think, Islam. It becomes really about
ethnicity.
About gender.
Or gender, sorry.
Yeah, gender. It becomes about gender.
But are women in those images being saved?
Not in that one where they were the hijab. Well, it's yours. The one
I agree. I think with the Muslim male cartoons, it is intrinsic that they're men but of colour, and it's so important. Whereas the women, we assume they're women because of the way they're dressed, but we can't see their faces. And if we can, like Jane Austen one, the first one that we saw, she's white. And yes, in a way, that's because she is safe. She's able to be saved because of that she's female, but also we cannot identify her ethnicity. So actually, when it comes to a man of colour, there's something we cannot save, and there's something intrinsically wrong with him, and that leads him to committing acts of violence or terror, or he's more prone to.
We have time for a couple. One more. Someone new.
I have a question here. Like it's an attempt to question. I'm not aware more about like French and English discourses or public discourses in France and in Britain, but from what I see from Canada, like you see this dichotomy. Like in 2013, there was the ban on religious symbols in Quebec, which is kind of French. And there was a backlash from all of the provinces against it. So what I see sometimes in Quebec is that there's an attempt to we are different from it. We are the French. We have to establish our identity. We have to be firm about who we are rather than. So don't you see that as part of? But I see more contestation, for example, in Tahnia's presentation. There are pros and there are the for and against, while in Charlie Hebdo I'm not sure, but are there kind of counter or oppositional narratives or satires that kind of advocate Muslims or so you see less in France, probably because it's a way of them to distinguish itself from the English power or from the I don't know if you can agree with that, or do you see other?
If I could just jump in there, I think around the cartoons that provoked the extreme terrorist actions as they had been portrayed, I think that it was the cumulative effect of the publication, the satire, plus the perceived attack on freedom of expression and the violence that actually meant that there was no counter discourse. So you actually had a situation where there was a triple sort of whammy, as you would say in Australia, that actually meant that people were very anti-Muslim in that period. So I think that it was very difficult then to have an alternative voice in that environment. I suspect now that there will be pushback to Charlie Hebdo. You see it from the Italians, and that was the attempt that I was trying to say, that there were unique circumstances around that event that further marginalised the people that were the butt of the joke, and it meant that they did not have the capacity to have a right of reply, and they were portrayed as not deserving of a voice. I suspect, and this is not my area of expertise, and I'd have to hand it over to people that are actually studying these responses. I think now there are possibly alternative narratives that are emerging.
I just want to add something. Maybe it's just to it's a puzzle. I think it's just try to answer as many questions, just to be able to make an interpretation of all of this. But I think that the thing in France is not just about the freedom of speech, it's about the right to blaspheme, which is protected by law. So what happened, if we look, I think it's a case study that is worth studying, the trial of 2007. There is this documentary which I recommend. It's called C'est dur d'être aimé par des cons, which is taken from the Muhammad cartoon when he's putting his hands here, saying it's hard to be loved by idiots. So it covers the trial from the first day to the last day to the verdict. In the way that the team, the people, the editor, Philippe Val, and his contributors were ecstatic at the idea of this going to public opinion. Mm-hmm. They were like you can see it in the way the documentary covers like even after the trial outside of the court, their meetings in restaurants and everywhere they were actually ecstatic about the idea that this is going to be a public question. And I feel like they divided themselves into two teams. One is talking about we're doing this because we are defenders of freedom of speech. Mm-hmm. And you see other members of the publication saying we're doing this to protect our right to blaspheme. Mm-hmm. So these are two things that they are playing with. Mm-hmm. So if the argument of freedom of speech doesn't work because it's vague, it's problematic, it's essayistic, they go to the argument of the right to blaspheme. We can blaspheme. It's protected by the law. In fact,
Wonderful. Well, thank you all, and please join me in thanking our panelists. And then it's probably right where you had tea a moment ago.